shelter. Without it, you will die. So if you aren't lucky enough to have your own cave like me, you'll need something more mobile, a tent or perhaps a tarp. Welcome to 2-Year Kit Reviews. The premise of this series is that I only review a piece of wild camping or outdoorsy equipment if it's still intact after 2 or more years of use. And if it can bear my company for that long, then it's definitely got something going for it, because I don't look after stuff at all. The hero of this episode then is the DD 3x3 Tarp, probably the most basic no-frills bushcraft tarp on the market. It's the ready salted crisps of the tarp world, the Foo Fighters, the Ford Fiesta. It comes in a bag which is plenty big enough. You don't need sushi master levels of rolling skills to put it away, with room left over for pegs and rope. I have long since lost the pegs that came with it, but they were this sort, I think. They're pretty good, light, and so easy to bend that if they get bent out of shape, you can bend them back into shape. The only downside is that if you drop them, they immediately transform into a birch twig and are lost forever. Hence why I had to buy a new set. The tarp doesn't come with rope, so you'll have to buy some paracord. Cut it to the desired length and burn the ends to seal it. Warning, the molten plastic goo that is formed in this process will stick to and burn your fingers. Once a dribble of it fell onto the lighter I was using and it burnt straight through the plastic like xenomorph spittle. No fun. Anyway, onto the tarp itself. What better trial ground for it than fat old Storm Bert as it wanders towards the southwest? Let's try this bad boy out.
Bad boy?
Yeah, you're right, it's not ideal, is it? What's a synonym for bad boy?
I don't know. Thing.
Let's try this thing out. Actually, terrible idea. The incessant deluge of Storm Bert is exactly the wrong sort of weather for tarp camping. Without the inner lining or ground sheet of a tent, even the most experienced woodsman is going to suffer some damp and discomfort armed only with a tarp. Also, I'd lost one of the guy ropes. No idea how. Take 2. Oh, great. Now it's Storm Dara. Twice as blustery as Bert, but only half as damp. I made this slightly rubbish shelter, then abandoned it for the night while I went to kip in a tent far away from falling trees. Would it still be there in the morning? Yes, and things had died down enough to actually demonstrate the potential of the DD 3x3. If I can find it. I have some regrets about buying the camouflage version. After all, in reality, the only person trying to find your tent is going to be you, and you've just made it more difficult for yourself. Still, maybe that will come in useful if the camping ban is reinforced. Anyway, it's a good sturdy tarp. It survived Storms Dara and Bert and several years of Storm George too. Reasonably cheap, reasonably tough and reasonably light. It doesn't excel in anything necessarily, but does it need to? It's just a big square of waterproof material. But the beauty of a tarp over a tent is in its adaptability. You only need to know a few tricks, and you have a whole range of different setups to play with. Start with a few knots. You need to learn the incredibly cool thief's knot, which can be tied with a swish of the wrist like this. Better still, it can be untied in an even more swashbuckling fashion like this. You'll also need another knot with a less cool name, the adjustable hitch, for the other side, as you need something you can, well, adjust to tighten the rope. I can never get these quite right, but have the principle down well enough. Wrap the rope around itself 3 or 4 times to create a friction-causing tunnel, then forget what you're supposed to do next and improvise some sort of tangle. I call this the shit hitch. Anyway, it works. You'll also need a couple of prusik loops, which are just shorter lengths of rope looped through themselves. Once you've mastered the art of throwing up a quick washing line, then you're away. The most straightforward setup is a simple A-frame, where you tie the tarp to the prusik loops, then peg down the 4 corners. Ideal for slinging a hammock underneath. Something I wish I'd been told earlier though is that you can get funky and asymmetric and make a diamond shape instead, which not only uses 2 fewer pegs but also looks more like a spaceship from an Amiga computer game. My most common use for it though, especially in the summer, is a sort of little open-sided shelter like this. Gets you out of the sun, drizzle or wind, while still affording you a nice view over your surroundings. And you can even tuck the spare bit of tarp in underneath to create a small area of ground sheet. Finally, here's a really cool thing. You can employ some origami skills and turn the tarp into a lightweight tent, freeing you from being confined to woodland and saving you from the tyranny of having to learn to tie knots. For this one, you need to work out where the wind is coming from and start with the back wall of your tent facing that. Simply peg down the middle and the 2 loops either side. Then you're going to skip the corners and peg in the second loop in at 45 degrees to the back like this. Tuck the corners away. Then you need to get your front 2 corners and peg them in a little closer together than those back 2. Here's the magic. Use your walking pole, or indeed a stick cut to exactly the right size, to raise a central strut. Then it's just a case of pegging back these flaps and finishing off with one down the middle of the entrance. A tent. Sort of. No ground sheet or inner lining, true, but plenty of space and surprisingly resilient. Oh, and one last very important thing. When you leave your campsite, make sure to leave that thief's knot until last, so that you look incredibly swish and suave as you sashay away. Shame there was no one there to see it except that wood pigeon. Quick roundup. Pros, not really. Cons, not really. The DD 3x3 is just a decent, reliable tarp. It has pretty much superseded my tent in all but the stormiest of weather. It's lighter and more versatile, if a little less comfortable.
As soon as I'm done filming, I have to go home. Look at this. The sun coming.
Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you all again if anything else survives 2 more years of me. Bye bye.